Okay, welcome back to ThinkTech here on Community Matters on a given Wednesday at 3 p.m. Today's the day after the election day. This is an important day. It's a time when we sort of gather ourselves up after whatever happened yesterday. So today we're going to talk about an anatomy of the OHA campaign, of one OHA campaign anyway, with a guy who ran, Keli'i Akina, who we know very well as one of our hosts. We're going to call it the 2014 candidate. He's a 2014 candidate for OHA. And boy, I really thought you were going to win, Keli'i. I really did.
Well, we gave it a good shot, Jay.
Yes, you did.
Really
You ran a great campaign.
Let me just say this at the outset. I am just so very grateful to all of our viewers on ThinkTech Hawaii, because I'm sure most of you voted, and that makes you exceptional in this state. And many of you may have voted for me, and I'm grateful for that because you believe in a far better future for Hawaii than we have today.
I thought you were going to win. Honestly, I did.
Well, we came close. We really gave the other candidates a run for their money, and it was really a remarkable story. It all started with 18 candidates at large. Can you believe a primary, an open primary with 18 candidates?
How many seats were there now? 6.
There are 9 seats on the trustee board of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Yeah. I was a candidate for the 3 seats up for contention.
At large.
That's right.
And what is an at-large seat?
An at-large candidate is somebody who serves statewide on the Board of Trustees of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which is now the 13th largest landholder in the state. It basically has 2 practical functions. On one hand, it stewards a large body and a growing body of land and resources that belong to the whole state. And secondly, it operates services and benefits for Native Hawaiians.
Why did you run?
Well, the reason that I ran has to do with a much bigger issue, and that is exactly what you feel, Jay. We care about Hawaii, don't we?
Yes.
We care about the future of Hawaii. Yes. We're invested here. I have 4 children, of whom 3 are on the mainland because of the cost of living here in Hawaii. We walk through downtown Honolulu and elsewhere and see homelessness. We're looking at the debt level of the state. These are the issues that concern us. And I decided I would start in one area that is very close to my heart, an organization that works with the Hawaiian people, but also has impact on others, and I do my part. So the real answer to the question as to why I ran was, like you, I care, and I wanted to make a difference for Hawaii.
This is the first time you ran for political office?
No, it's not. I ran 2 years ago, my first attempt for a seat in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and we garnered, in that first time attempt without any political name whatsoever, about 35, 38, I think it was 37 plus thousand votes. And that got us started so that we were... That's
pretty good.
Yeah, and given the fact that a state legislator gets into office with anywhere between 5,000 and 12,000 votes and so forth, we had good name recognition from the first campaign, and then we decided, you know, let's do it again. And I did not get into office this time. And at first I thought, I'll be disappointed. So I prepared myself. And when the first results came in on the night of November the 4th, it seemed obvious to me that I wasn't going to have a place in government this term. And so I said, okay, I'm prepared to get disappointed. But as the evening went on, I didn't feel disappointed at all. I thought, number one,
lucky break.
I'm free to do and say anything I want for the next 4 years without having to hold public office. And number 2, when we saw the votes come in, it was staggering to have 92,000 votes. And what that meant was we got more votes than congressional candidates, some of them did. We got more votes than any state representatives running for office. And with 350,000 people showing up at the polls or sending in their ballots, our campaign earned 1 in 4 votes. 1 out of 4 voters voted for Keli'i Akina. And what I really want to say is that's a testament to a small volunteer group being able to get a message out and a testament to the people who really care about issues. So it was staggering. I just can't get over it that we got 92,000 votes. 1 in every 4 voters in Hawaii voted for our message.
Why do you think those 92,000 people voted for you?
Well, I think it helps to analyze the votes that went to the candidates who were able to defeat me. And my hat goes off, of course, to returning incumbent John Waihee IV, returning incumbent Rowena Akana, and also to Le'ahu Isa, who is a former state legislator and board member. They were able to take advantage of the many years of votes that they have won from the public.
Name recognition.
Name recognition, loyalty, and so forth. And the figures show that they did extremely little campaigning and extremely little fundraising or spending on their campaign.
Name recognition.
That was very significant.
But you know what it
name
also
recognition.
shows? It shows that the OHA election is largely based on name recognition.
Yes, it is.
It is not based on issues.
Well, and that's the interesting dynamic that we introduced here. I didn't have that kind of name recognition, certainly amongst the large numbers of the Hawaiian population, and not only did I not necessarily have that recognition amongst non-Hawaiians didn't even recognize the name OHA or that they could vote in it. Many didn't even realize that it was on their voting map. We believe, both in terms of the way we campaigned and in terms of things people told us, that most of our 92,000 votes are people who heard our message and resonated with our message. And they were new votes. They're votes from people, many of whom don't vote in OHA, but care about what we stood for, care about what we spoke about.
These are non-Hawaiian voters, you think?
Oh, they have to be. As well as Hawaiian voters. We had some wonderful friends amongst the Hawaiian community, my family, my friends, people whom I've worked with for many years since the beginning of my career on the Waianae Coast, where I was a social work, Christian worker outreach person, and they were involved. But there aren't enough votes amongst the Native Hawaiian population to match the number of votes that are cast in OHA, and that means a very large portion of the entire general population participates. And so we had across-the-board support.
Oh, that's great. So were they voting for you because of your anti-sovereignty position, because of your racial what do you want to call it, characterization position? I mean, what was the reason?
Well, let me just clarify a couple terms you used here,
Please.
and then I'll answer the question as to why I think they were voting for me. I did take a solid position that I believe that the U.S. government and the state government should not be in the business of spending money, taxpayer money, using resources, land that belongs to everyone, in order to create a non-U.S. sovereign nation. That's unconstitutional. It's also something that doesn't use the resources well. So I'm well on record there. I wouldn't say that I oppose efforts of all Hawaiians who want to work for self-determinism and so forth. I'm just saying, let's keep OHA, our state government, and the federal government out of that. Yes. The second thing is that it's not so much that I believe that there's racial discrimination, but rather there's a distinctive that we have here in Hawaii that belonged to the Hawaiian people, that we included everybody. And that was a big part of my message. I based my message on the 1840 Hawaiian Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom, which said, God has made from one koko, or one blood, all the peoples of the earth to dwell in harmony. And I also based my position on the fact that in the Hawaiian Kingdom, under a constitutional monarchy, even from the time of the leadership of King Kamehameha I, citizenship was extended to Caucasians, Japanese, and Chinese. So I did take distinctive positions on that. But I'll tell you this, most people were not voting on the issue of sovereignty. Most people were not voting on the issue of federal recognition of Hawaiians as an Indian tribe. Most people were not voting on a racial issue. They were really voting on our general message, which was this: we've got to preserve the aloha spirit here in Hawaii. An organization like OHA should not be about dividing people even into race-based nations. It's about, we need to practice aloha in the sense of including people, bringing people together, working together. You know, we always say, e hana kako, you know, the wonderful Hawaiian statement, e pule kako, let's pray, kako, together, all of us. And I know you're a praying man, especially when things go rough.
I'm a working
There
man
you go.
anyway.
And that's right. So we also say, e hana kako, especially in our state. Democrat, Republican, and we have now learned libertarians as well. Right wing, left wing, every racial group that you possibly can think of our message was, let's work together, and that's the pathway for the future. My children have a heritage of being blood Hawaiians, as well as other backgrounds. That's the past. But they need to embrace the present in order to be well prepared for the future. So one of the things that I love to say in my campaign, and I think people really resonated with this, was I'm proud to be Hawaiian, and I'm proud to be an American, and I see no contradiction between
You said
the
that
two.
many times. So what's it like? You know, I mean, I call this anatomy of an OHA campaign. How, for example, was this campaign different from your earlier campaign? How is an OHA campaign different from, say, a State House campaign?
Well, the way in which this campaign was different from my earlier campaign is we were totally amateur, neophyte, volunteer in my first campaign with no experience. This campaign, we were amateur, neophyte, without much experience, and it was 2 years later, and we'd learned a few things that worked well. So we were able to do them. So really, this was not what you think of when you have in mind a professional political campaign. I remember getting started. It was my daughter who was a senior at Kamehameha Schools, and she was student body president and had a bigger political machine than I did.
She didn't get 92,000 votes.
She said to me, Daddy, why don't you run for OHA in my first race? And this was just before the filing deadline. And I said, I don't have a political organization. I have no staff. And here's this teenage girl. She says to me, I'll be your campaign manager. And that's how we got started. And our team, you'd like this. They were her friends from speech and debate, from Iolani, Punahou, Kamehameha, and so forth. All these kids who are now at Wharton, at Princeton, at Harvard, at Stanford. One kid who's at the Wharton School of Economics, at that time as a high schooler, wrote an economic development plan for Kaka'ako. We had briefs and position papers. We had a thick file. It was exciting. And then they all went shopping to look for campaign headquarters to rent. They were acting on their sense of the image of what a political candidate should do.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. So that was our origins. What happened in the first campaign is that we didn't win, but we got on the map, and a lot of people came around us, including Jay Fidell, who got to know me. And it was incredible. All of a sudden, I knew all these lawyers. I knew all these business executives. I knew all of these people who had political background, including political professionals and so forth. Knew Republicans, Democrats, who were now in our entourage. And so this time when we launched the campaign, we had people who knew what they were talking about. We could actually ask questions like, you know, these 31 acres in Kaka'ako, how much are they really valued at? How does the development plan work? We actually had the right kinds of experts, and I think that was one way in which we were different. But still, we were homespun. You asked, how does this campaign differ from other campaigns? And the public would be interested to know this. First of all, OHA is a statewide campaign for the at-large candidates, and even the island candidates have to run statewide because everybody votes on every position. Now, when you think about it, for a low-profile race, not like U.S. congressperson or governor, and really only the governor and lieutenant governor are statewide, really. For an OHA candidate to run statewide and have constituencies on every island is an incredible barrier ever to being able to change the incumbency. So it's an extremely rare thing that...
Name recognition.
That's right.
Because if you have the name recognition on all islands, it's not likely that somebody can come and run against you.
Incumbents are able to build within 4 years tremendous followings with loyalty. We talk about the pork in the legislature. It's no different in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, where incumbents can be associated with benefits that provide for certain constituencies on certain islands, grants, and so forth. I'm not saying that all the incumbents are directly involved in that, but there is certainly a strong sense of gratitude that communities feel for any benefit they get from the OHA organization, and they credit that to the incumbents.
Because it pays benefits. There are benefits. And you always look to the source of the benefits.
So for anyone to mount an attack is very difficult. Now, when you have an open primary and you had 18 competitors, it disperses the vote tremendously so that the only ones who retain any critical mass are the incumbents. But what was remarkable is that I was able to break into the top 5 out of 18 in the primary, which I think was almost a bigger feat.
Two votes away, two seats away.
That's right.
Two candidates
and
away.
And so we were able to clear through the field all the way up to the final 6 that were able to go to the general election. So this is very different from most races.
It's just a good system. It sounds like it's a system, as you said, that perpetuates the incumbents.
It most definitely does perpetuate incumbency. Yeah. And it is probably the hardest race for a non-incumbent to break in to office. And that rarely happens, and when it does happen, as it did this year, for one of the candidates, it was because there were 3 seats available or up for election. The incumbents, 1, 2, and 3, were there. The 3rd incumbent, Oswald Stender, decided to resign. And as a result, it opened up a seat. But it went to a politically experienced person who had been in office many years, Ahu Issa.
Who people know from the legislature.
Yeah, who's been in the legislature many years with a large following, who's also been a Board of Education member with a following at the time that they were elected positions.
Yeah.
And so there was a large constituency. So OHA perpetuates that.
Yeah.
I actually think that there's a better way to do it, but unfortunately, as long as power remains vested, it will tend to be a very static system.
Do you know, it was created at the the Constitutional Convention of 1978.
That's right.
Would you favor another Constitutional Convention to reform the way these seats are filled?
Well, first of all, generally, I believe that it would be a great time to have a Constitutional Convention here in Hawaii, because we have gone since 1978 so long. How many years is this? 35 years or more?
Yeah.
In which we
but
have
only 5 years to go or less.
And we have
the next possible.
That's right. And we have so we haven't had the people weigh in and work with each other on crafting better government. And I think our government needs revision from time to time. In terms of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, I think that there's some issues that need to be addressed at the Constitutional Convention. One of those issues is the legitimacy of a state government agency in which the trustees swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, the legitimacy of them starting a sovereign government. And this is a confusing issue for much of the public, but I think it's pretty clear to constitutional scholars that there's a problem over here.
And it should be defined. It should have been defined in 1978, but maybe it wasn't on the radar so much. Now it's certainly on the radar, and maybe a Constitutional Convention.
That's right.
Could clarify exactly what the mission of OHA is. We need to clarify exactly what our mission is too. That's why we take a short break. That's Keli'i Akina, 2014 candidate for OHA here on Community Matters in the ThinkTech series. We're talking about the anatomy of an OHA campaign. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Kenneth Lawson. I'm your host here at Life in the Law. I'm really interested in law as I practiced it for 18 years before coming to Hawaii. I practiced criminal law and civil rights law on the mainland. Now I teach law at the University of Hawaii Law School, William S. Richardson School of Law. And I bring in guests who are very current on legal issues that affect your life here in Hawaii. Come and join me every Wednesday at 1 p.m. as we explore how the law affects you, how the law is changing, and why it's important that you should care about what's going on in your community. See you then.
Okay, welcome back to Community Matters here in the ThinkTech series. We're talking about the anatomy of an OHA campaign, the one conducted by Keli'i Akina, a 2014 candidate for OHA. I wanted to get to the 92,000. You know, this is like when I was a kid, I'd come back and my mother would say, how did you do in class? Well, I got 95. She said, 95? What happened to the other 5 points? Where did they go? You know, it's a New York thing. But okay, what happened to the rest of them? Why didn't they vote for you? Seems like to me, you know, you laid out a good, rational, community-minded position. Who could argue with, well, I suppose you could argue with the sovereignty, and you could argue with, you know, keeping race out of a government agency. You know, the idea about a better aloha for the islands, that's a really good idea. And if that's the way you were defined, in the campaign, you should have won. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought you would. I told you. So the question is, where do the other ones go? Where do the other 5% go? The ones those guys who could have put you 2 more candidates ahead and made you win. Why did they not vote for you?
Well, I think there are many factors. One, the most obvious and objective variable is they voted for someone else.
Okay.
And
that's too simple, though.
As we discussed it, many of those votes, perhaps a majority of them, went to people out of the loyalty, name recognition factor. And one of the things that kind of supports that thesis is that there was almost no advertising done by the winning candidate. And our campaign raised far more money and spent far more money than the winning candidate. A little advertising or promotion from the top 3, and yet they get in, or the top 2 definitely, and the third person didn't advertise at all. So we're dealing with name recognition. But you know what? That's okay. I went in with my eyes open. I'm not complaining about that.
Isn't that arrogance not to do anything?
Well, I don't know how I'd characterize it. I just want to take a look at the reality of that we are in a system that perpetuates incumbency in office.
We don't have to do anything.
Right? We're in a system in which we have a very low voter turnout, so that a few people who keep people in power continue to do that. But actually, I have no complaints about that, because I think we actually created voters. I think we actually educated people to vote for the OHA candidate of their choice. We actually took our message places, and where we could measure our effectiveness, we found a remarkable find. Wherever we went, we won people over. It was just a matter, in the space of a 6-month campaign, of gaining the resources. I'm pretty convinced that if we had another 3 months of this campaign and continued to raise money and advertise, our share would increase significantly. We might have gotten in. So there's no villain here, and there's no duplicity. The system is what it is. We who are trying to challenge the system need to get out and reach out even more. And that's why I'm so thrilled that we got 92,000 people.
Yeah,
You know, that's a remarkable result, that 92,000 people would like our message of uniting Hawaii.
But let me throw a theory at you and see what you think about it. You said before, and I think we've all known, that OHA is kind of an aardvark on the ballot. What is OHA? People don't know. Who are these people running? I don't know them. I don't know any of them. Even the ones who are incumbent, I don't know what kind of record they have. It doesn't get into the press. There's really not a lot of publicity about it, and it's not important to my life. That's what I say. I mean, just in my situation, that's what I say. So, therefore, I don't even try. I'm not going to vote for you. I started a long time ago not voting for people I didn't know. If I didn't know who that person was or what that person stood for, something about the track record, I wouldn't vote just because it was a name recognition thing. It's my thing. But, my theory here is that a lot of people don't believe they are involved in OHA, don't believe OHA affects them, don't know anything about it, don't know the names, and so they don't vote. Okay, and then the ones who do vote, that leaves the ones who do vote. There's people who are more, Native Hawaiians maybe, who are more of them are into the sovereignty issue, and when I say polarization issue. So therefore, if they are going to vote, they're going to vote against a guy like you, because you're taking a broader, more progressive look at things. And therefore, those guys were among the guys who didn't vote for you. And so the natural process of the organization, which is, we agree, imperfect, the natural process does not favor you. And with your progressive thinking, it's not likely that you can get in the front door. And that's what happened here. That's my theory.
Well, I commend you on having a theory. I would only augment that with this. I think part of that I don't want to give too much weight to is the thought that people were voting against me. There's no question about it that there were some individuals who clearly opposed my message, including some of the opponents, and there would be some of their supporters that opposed my message. Yeah. But you see, the majority of people who did vote are probably not voting on issues anyway. I believe that our voters, although there weren't enough to win, were issue voters. But the majority of people were voting, as you pointed out before, on name recognition.
You know what? That's all around the state.
We had
it's on every election. People don't seem to vote on issues. They vote on names.
We had a joke running around the campaign the first time I ran. The teenagers came up with it, a little skit. It was, who's the most intelligent candidate? Oh, Dr. Akina. Who's the most caring candidate? Oh, Dr. Akina. Who's going to do the most for the Hawaiian people? Oh, Dr. Akina. Who are you going to vote for? Oh, my auntie.
There you go. It's that simple.
Yeah, and you know, it was incredible. I went on the weekend before the election. I went to a Hawaiian convention of Hawaiian civic clubs co-sponsored by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Beautiful Hawaiian people. Loved the music, the culture. Everyone was my auntie, my uncle, and so forth. And many of them had no problem telling me, oh yes, I'm voting for so-and-so, and I'm voting for so-and-so, but I like what you say, but they weren't planning to vote for me. It was a wonderful affirmation that they liked what I had to say, that they believed it was important, but there was already a commitment. It's almost like, that's my family member, that's my cousin, and so
It's
forth.
more important. Blood is thicker than water or logic.
One of the sitting trustees early in the race said to me that he believed that I needed to be in there. He had encouraged me to run, and he told me he would endorse me publicly. So the day came to sign a form which had his quote on it and so forth, and when we brought him the form and sat down, he was going to sign that and so forth, he went, you know, Keli'i, I support you completely, but my wife's cousin is also running in the primary, and my family told me we have to support him. Now that person, I won't even mention the name of that candidate, you probably wouldn't know it, got extremely small votes, was one of the lower 5 out of 18, and nobody's heard of them.
Yeah.
But I thought that was an interesting story that helps me to realize that while I do have critics, and while my message challenges, I don't think that there were a throng of people who got up there and said, let's keep Akina out of office.
Okay.
I think, if anything, name brand recognition and pure apathy were much bigger,
no, I think
bigger
that sounds
factors.
right.
And this is a hopeful way to see it, because hopefully then those who do rally around an issue, and I am so grateful to people across the board, socially, ethnically, in terms of professions, who came out, and we really had a diverse community of people who were campaigning for us, who were voting for us, who were writing notes to us and so forth, who were sending out endorsement letters and so forth. You know, we even had a Jewish kid who grew up in New York City who does a television production gig here in Honolulu.
I'm not ashamed of it. So, you know, I went to a party over the weekend, and there was a waiter who serves. This is one of the big family parties, right? And there was a waiter who was serving us, and I said, "Who are you going to vote for?" And he said, "Look at me, I'm Japanese. Who do you think I'm going to vote for?"
And we're laughing at that.
It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
And yet that's part of the reality. You know, I've raised my children with my beautiful wife, Patty.
She really is beautiful, by the way.
We have tried to teach them that it doesn't matter, red and yellow, black and white, they're precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. That's a value that we want to instill within them. It's a value I want to share using my First Amendment right here in the United States. And it's a value I want to stand for with the law when we discriminate against people. But I also accept the fact, and we have to recognize that in Hawaii, people behave that way. And so rather than complain, I think we need to give people something worth voting for. And this raises a bigger issue that I'm concerned about in this election. We had, I think, about 355,000 people vote in some form. About half of them voted in advance. And so that would say about 175,000 people or so showed up at the poll. I haven't seen the rankings yet, but we went into the poll with the second lowest voter turnout in the nation. I think we may have won the award this time for the lowest voter turnout.
I think so.
I wouldn't be so surprised.
It was just over 50%.
And so the real question is not why didn't this proportion of the tiny proportion that voted vote for me? The real question is what can we do about the rest of the state so that we actually get involved in politics?
So before you get to that, you have to ask, why did only 50 some odd % vote? What happened to the rest? What is discouraging them? Why the malaise? I think we have a national malaise too, not to
Yes.
not to exclude Hawaii from that, not to exclude that from what happens here. But do you have a thought about why they did not vote?
I think there are many variables that we can look at and examine. Number one, many voters felt that there is not much discrimination between the two candidates. We're going to get the same economy regardless of which candidate we vote for on the gubernatorial or the congressional level. Secondly, many voters may have felt, what do I believe? What's credible? We see negative ads on one side, negative ads on the other side. Depends on who you talk to as to what's the truth. I'm giving up. I'm not going to even go to the poll as a result of that. And I think there's a third factor as well. We have been an extremely tolerant culture here in Hawaii with respect to what we allow government to get away with. We have in many ways cultivated a culture of dependency upon government institutions and organizations, government programs, insurance programs, healthcare programs, and dependency upon fueling them with federal funding and so forth. This doesn't create a culture of people who are willing to hold government accountable. This doesn't create a culture of people who are willing to hold their leaders accountable. It creates a culture of people who are dependent. And when you are dependent, you act like a child rather than...
Right. It's that same thing about the benefits are bestowed upon you, and you appreciate the individuals who are bestowing them. Let me take a short break. Keli'i Akina, 2014 candidate for OHA, here on Community Matters, one of the ThinkTech talk shows. And we're talking about the anatomy of an OHA campaign the day after. Really interesting. We'll be right back.
Mahalo for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. We are a channel dedicated to raising public awareness about the importance of technology, energy, diversification, and globalism to the future of Hawaii. We broadcast and stream daily from 1 to 5 every weekday, and we broadcast on Olelo 54 and OC16 TV. All of our shows are archived on thinktechhawaii.com, and we hope to see you there. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here. ThinkTech Community Matters, the anatomy of an OHA campaign with Keli'i Akina, 2014 candidate for OHA. So, it's really, really interesting because it's a barometer. It's a canary, if you will, in the coal mine. And I think the same discouraged voters, the same phenomenon exists in the electorate for OHA as the rest of the state. And I think all your points about why are good points. And it's sad because it doesn't allow for accountability, and it allows for government not to do its job. And if that happens, we all suffer. I don't know why people don't. What is it? It's education, maybe? Civics in school that make them feel it's not their duty to vote?
We don't really talk a lot about our responsibility. In our society, we do talk about our rights. But what's interesting is to take a look at the Chinese. Their emphasis is not on the rights of people, but on the responsibility. If we can find a way of having both, kind of the yin-yang, so to speak, of political involvement, people will think, I have certain rights and they need to be defended, and I need to act in order to preserve my rights. But I also have a responsibility to be engaged in the process. And I think what I mentioned earlier removes responsibility, and that is the sense that government is taking care of us. And if government is taking care of us and we're vested in our government-insured pension plan or whatever it may be, the contracts we receive, the federal funding for our industry, complacency sets in.
Laziness is what it is, yeah.
And that complacency works against saying, I've got a responsibility for shaping Hawaii. I had an interesting interview a little bit earlier today, a few hours ago, and it'll show on one of our major news stations today. And the topic had nothing to do with the campaign. In my daytime capacity as president of the Grassroots Institute, the news media frequently comes to us on economic issues. So the question put to me in the interview was, what are the prospects for Hawaii's federal funding now that we have 4 Democrats in Congress with a Republican Congress and Senate? And it was interesting because I sensed that the interviewer was wanting me to talk about how woeful this situation was. But actually, I was quite optimistic. I'm thinking anything that helps to wean us off of the assured entitlement of federal funding is actually going to make us...
The dependence.
Right. It will make us become more responsible. And then I said to her, I said, well, we will be forced to find other avenues of funding our government and so forth. And she said, what would those be? And we just went down a bullet list of ways in which we could stimulate the economy, reduce costs, and so forth. And, you know, it's only when we take that responsibility into our own hands that we actually generate the kind of government accountability that is needed.
We had the dependency with Dan and OA for decades, you know, I think, and we got lulled into that, and now it's deep in the political culture of the state. And as discussed before, you know, the notion of voting on issues or on candidates who stand for issues, it seems to be secondary. And for example, I doubt the people who voted for or against you really spent much time thinking about the Jones Act. And you've really tried to make that an important substantive issue.
Well, you know,
it hasn't gotten that way. It really wasn't.
I had a little bit of policy envy when I would go to forums for candidates in multiple races, because I would sit there and, yes, I would be asked the OHA questions, and I was glad to answer them. I prepared for that. And then I would hear other candidates for Congress, for governor, being asked, what would you do about the unfunded liabilities? What would you do about the protectionist shipping law, the Jones Act? What would you do? And I was thinking, oh, would I give anything to answer those questions?
Really, yeah.
And that helped me to see something a bit on my own heart and orientation. The privilege of working with issues relating to our economy, relating to running government better, which is what we do at the Grassroots Institute. That privilege has given me just a wonderful opportunity to gain insight, to develop friends who understand these issues. And so I have to say this. When I didn't win a seat in OHA, when I realized at the printout as it was being announced on the news that I wasn't going to be sitting on the board of OHA for 4 years, a strange feeling came over me. I was actually tremendously excited about the fact that I'd be able to work on these other issues. And not to say that I don't care about the Hawaiian issues. I'm definitely going to be committed to advancing the cause of aloha and working against the government exploiting Hawaiians through a race-based nation or trying to tribalize them into an Indian tribe. I'm going to work against that. But still, you and I get to go off on environment, economy, and other issues and work on those together.
That's our responsibility, Keli'i.
Yes.
As citizens.
And that's one of the things I enjoy about ThinkTech Hawaii, which really is a great endeavor. I do have to congratulate you on bringing together many, many people who are smarter than you and me, for the most part, in their particular expertise area, to bring issues to bear in front of a global and a Hawaii audience. And
well,
so
thank you, Keli'i, and thank you for being here and you know, embracing these positions and addressing these issues. It raises all boats. Certainly raises the boat for ThinkTech. But let me ask you, you know, you've learned a lot. I'd like to ask you actually, what lessons are prominent in your mind now? And with that, I'd like to ask you whether you'll go for a third time, or look somewhere else in order to express your views on these economic and community issues.
Well, one of the most important lessons is one my mother reminded me of this morning when I called her to talk about the results.
She asked you where the other 5% was.
No, she pointed out that I had more votes than congressional delegates, congressional candidates, and told me that I was, she said, you were the right candidate, but the wrong race. But I'll let my mother ponder that. I think one of the things that got reinforced to me, and I just feel so gratified in this, is that winning is not about gaining the seat. Winning is about communicating truth and values and standing up for something and giving people a vision and making relationships with people that inspire them to be part of changing government. And that was exciting. I can't tell you how elated I was. I already told you I was to be able to see that we as a team garnered 92,000 votes. Now those 92,000 people out there, most of whom probably voted on issues, represent a significant part of our population, especially since they are 1 out of every 4 voters. And in any other race would have been a winning number. And so, to me, in answer to your question, I sense a strong sense of stewardship. I wasn't disappointed about not getting into my seat or a seat for myself. The disappointment, if there was any real disappointment, was all the people who worked hard, who gave money, who seemed to be taking this. In fact, several of them this morning have been taking this far worse than me. I've been consoling them. And at first they think I'm kidding when I say, we actually won something. And I'm so grateful for that. But it isn't really about the seat. And there is a stewardship then of the community that we have been able to bring together. It has, in many ways, renewed my faith in Hawaii's people, that there are people who, when they get the right information, are able to tap into a vision that is great, will rise to the occasion. And I'm going to keep going. I'm absolutely going to keep going and building and stewarding that community.
You've been unique. You've pushed the envelope on issues. To my recollection, you've been the first candidate for OHA that took positions like this. This is and in so doing, although you didn't win, you redefined, the mission. You raised the question about OHA's mission. If there were going to be a constitutional convention next year, and it'll be, gee whiz, it'll only be 3 years from now, when the vote will come up as to whether to have a constitutional convention. I really think there should be. Then when people look at OHA, they'll be thinking of you and those issues you raised. But what about the lessons in terms of conducting a campaign? I mean, had you raised more money, had you gone more to the TV, it's a statewide race, right, at large, do you think you would have had a better chance to win? And do you think that having those lessons and doing it differently next time would give you a chance to win? And will you try?
Well, we won 92,000 votes in one of the most incredibly difficult races in which to do that. And we had to do it on a shoestring budget. We had to do it by doing the very basics of leadership and campaigning. First of all, giving people a vision that would inspire them. Secondly, doing my very best to live up to what people would expect of a candidate. So I made a commitment that I would work harder than anyone else on our team. And there were many days from the primary on through the general, a 6-month period of time altogether of the campaign. But I was the only one standing on a street corner waving. And
I can vouch for the fact you worked hard every day.
And I think that's what people expect of their candidates. The other thing is that there are ways of running a campaign that are emerging now. We did very well in social media. We were able to track the numbers in various social media categories, whether it's Facebook and so forth, and different aspects of this, and saw that we, as far as we know, in terms of the numbers that smart people who use the internet can get into, that we were, for our little budget, the 3rd most sophisticated social media campaign in the state under a gubernatorial and a congressional candidate.
Great.
And so It can be done. I think that one of the things that we need to recognize is that there are young people, and when I say young people, I mean college students, there are young professionals who are looking for people who will provide an avenue for them to pursue their values and to make a difference. And I don't mean to criticize a more professional campaign, but we were told several times that volunteers and others found on our campaign they were able to do things that they weren't allowed to do elsewhere because there were paid staff working on that kind of thing.
Well, one thing is clear. You've got to run again, whether it's OHA or another elected office. You've got to continue to take these positions. You've got to continue to be a host here on our shows. You've got to continue to engage in the dialogue. It's very important. Keli'i Akina, 2014 candidate for OHA. Community matters, and it does. The anatomy of an OHA campaign the day after, wow. We are honored to have you here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jay, for all of your support, and aloha to all the ThinkTech Hawaii viewers.
Aloha.